Indeed, now with the State of the City presentation, I want to thank all of our board chairs for your presentations this evening, and to all of our board members, indeed, for all of your contributions throughout the year in making Bel Air a better place to live. The State of the City this year starts with our new City Council. As we've welcomed 3 new members, this council is more visibly reflective of the diversity of opinion throughout the community, and moving forward, it will have the ability to shape the future of our city in the years to come. But the City Council does not do so on its own. It relies on public input in setting the overall policy direction, which is then implemented by the professional staff who run the city day to day. We each have a role to play: council, staff, and importantly, every member of the public. This new term, we have a tremendous opportunity to work together. And for us to do so most effectively, I submit, starts with a shared appreciation of the local government process. Bel Air residents have demonstrated their power as a voting electorate. Bel Air residents have also demonstrated the power of showing up in large numbers at City Hall, whether at meetings of the City Council or of our citizen boards and commissions. However, those are just 2 ways in which residents can meaningfully contribute to the direction of their city. Our local government process and the people who facilitate and protect that process are there to ensure that everyday citizens have everyday opportunities to get the information they need, the answers to their questions, and responsiveness to their service delivery concerns and expectations. This year's State of the City, I'll take the opportunity to get back to basics just a bit, to highlight some of the many ways afforded by our local government process in which we can all work together in moving Bel Air forward. Voting is the most obvious and most direct form of citizen participation. But to take your involvement to the next level and maximize the effectiveness of your input, I'd encourage you to get to know your city government. I'll briefly describe the specific roles set forth in our city charter and code of ordinances that each of these groups play in our decision-making process, and the importance of understanding the process itself. You have regular opportunities to provide your input directly to these decision makers in public meetings. And of course, you can reach out and engage with the staff anytime. There's a structure to our decision-making process to ensure that nothing is done at random and that short-term decisions are made with the necessary reference to long-term context. If there is to be a change in the policy direction of the city, it's through the strategic planning process that it will be accomplished. The comprehensive plan, our longest range policy document, sets forth a consensus vision for the future of our city over the next 20 years and beyond. And it comes up this year for its periodic 5-year review, which is itself an opportunity for meaningful public engagement. Council still has to work out the scope and process for that review, but whatever it ends up being, we hope you'll participate. In covering a shorter time frame than the comprehensive plan, our council adopted priorities inform numerous decisions, big and small, and provide the direction on which city staff rely in their daily work throughout the year. Tonight, I'll refer to the priorities for context and as a useful framework for assessing the current state of the city. Our most recent election, of course, was of the City Council, including 3 new members. Democracy is a beautiful thing, and I'm not at all hesitant to openly acknowledge the change in direction that this new council seemingly represents. As I noted in welcoming my new colleagues at the installation ceremony last month, everyone should now feel they have a seat at the table. With that comes tremendous opportunity and also responsibility and accountability. I'm pleased to report we're off to a very good start in working together and need look no further than our last council meeting 1 week ago tonight. On any number of issues, reasonable minds will differ and respectfully disagree, but the way we go about it sets the tone from the top. And I'm grateful to each of my fellow council members for our collective commitment to professionalism and decorum in conducting the people's business, and look forward to continuing that commitment throughout this council term. Other recent elections in which our voters did their part include authorizing our current bond program, Bonds for Better Bel Air 2016, and also our 2017 charter election, in which the voters approved in very strong numbers 18 individual ballot propositions to amend our charter for the first time in 11 years. We'll have the opportunity to do so again this May in the resident petitioned charter election on sidewalks, pursuant to the amendment mechanism provided for in the charter itself and governed by state law. The question that will be put to voters isn't just about sidewalks, but about what the charter, our Constitution, if you will, should say or not say about sidewalks. More broadly, consider the potential ramifications of how we answer that question for our legislative process generally. And that's true regardless which side of the sidewalks issue you're on. Now, here's a city government organizational chart for your reference, which you can also find at page 21 of tonight's State of the City Report handout. This report is new this year. It's something I expect will continue to build and improve upon in future years. The staff have worked really hard on it, and I know will appreciate your feedback. Getting to know your city government, let's start with the City Council. First, we're not very hard to find. Navigate to the Mayor and Council page under the Our Government tab on the city website. There you can read council members' individual bios, email us directly, download meeting agendas and minutes, and even sign up in advance to speak at an upcoming meeting. Our council is made up of 7 members, including the mayor, who has the same voting privilege as council members. All are elected at large. Council members serve staggered 4-year terms, while the mayor serves a term of 2 years. In both cases, the term limit is up to 8 years consecutively, so 2 terms for council members and 4 for the mayor. Council member roles and responsibilities as the governing body are set out in the city charter. Council's job is to establish city policy, including by enacting ordinances, adopting an annual budget and tax rate, authorizing the issuance of bonds, awarding contracts, approving the comprehensive plan and the capital improvement plan, and setting priorities for the entire city organization. The City Council conveys its policy direction to the city manager, who is then responsible directly to the council for its implementation and administration. The City Council does not run the city day to day, and serving on council is not a full-time job. That's the role of the city manager. And the charter, in fact, prohibits the mayor and council from interfering in the day-to-day operation of the city or from ordering and directing the staff who report to the city manager. However, everything the staff does is within the context of council's policy direction and with the resources authorized by council. So council's role is very much that of a board of directors. And in keeping with the notion that council acts as a board of directors, I'll quote a bit from the charter. It provides that the city manager shall be the chief executive officer and head of the administrative branch of the city government. The city manager shall be responsible to the council for the proper administration of all affairs of the city. His specific duties set out in the charter include hiring and overseeing the city workforce who deliver the quality city services we all depend on, preparing and proposing an annual budget and then administering it after its adoption by council, reporting on the finances and administrative activities of the city and on its financial condition and future needs, and making recommendations as appropriate. Outside of what our charter says, city management is a well-established profession, and city managers subscribe to professional standards, including an adopted code of ethics. I'll tell you, speaking from my own experience in serving on council, I can add to this that while the city manager and staff take their policy direction from the council, they also provide the necessary information and context to aid council's decision-making, and specifically with reference to council-adopted policy. That's not actually as circular as it may sound. In a moment, I'll speak to our strategic planning process in which the several planning elements all tie into and feed off of one another. That's to promote consistency in council's policy direction and also to ensure that staff implementation is in full alignment with it. So that's what I'm referring to in the last bullet point on this slide. That the city manager and staff do not drive particular outcomes, but they do have a role in providing information and context and in managing and supporting the decision-making process, including by making recommendations to council based on council's own adopted policy. The dedicated, hard-working professionals who deliver the quality city services we all depend on are organized into these several departments and functional areas. As you get to know them, you'll find they love what they do. They care deeply about this city and the people and families that they serve, and they come to work every day with a sense of purpose. As an organization, we pride ourselves on being a premier public sector employer. We're thoughtful about whom we hire, and when new employees sign on with us, they sign on to our employee commitment statement, which is an affirmation of our organizational culture focused on responsiveness, customer service, competence, safety awareness, a positive environment, and teamwork. The city staff put this commitment into practice every day as City of Bel Air ambassadors and diligent public servants. This evening, we heard the annual reports of our citizen boards and commissions, highlighting for us all of their activities throughout the past year. Those identified as advisory boards are just that. They're created by the council to support and provide input on the city programs and affairs within their subject matter purview, and to make advisory recommendations to the council as appropriate. The statutory boards are mandated and governed by state law concerning land use and the regulation of structures. Their charges are as set forth by statute and include quasi-judicial functions, but they can also serve in an advisory capacity in their respective subject matter areas to the extent there's no conflict with state law. In general, the citizen boards and commissions meet at least monthly on a regular meeting schedule, which is posted on the city website. A notable exception is the Board of Adjustment, which, given its quasi-judicial nature, really only meets when there are docketed cases set for hearing. And the other exception is the Audit Finance Board, which operates more as a committee of council with the addition of a citizen appointee. And it meets in advance of the annual audit presentation each year and occasionally at other times as needed. All board and commission meetings are open to the public in accordance with the State Open Meetings Act, and public comment is always welcomed and encouraged. Those interested in serving on a city board or commission may apply online. The annual application cycle starts around March or April, with interviews conducted and appointments made by the City Council in June. We also advertise open positions as vacancies may occur from time to time throughout the year. Our citizen boards and commissions are a very important component of the local government process we're talking about tonight, and provide numerous opportunities for individual residents to get involved and contribute to the direction of their city, whether through their public comment or by stepping up and seeking an appointment to serve. Now, the importance of this slide to understanding our local government process cannot be overstated. I earlier made the seemingly circular statement that council's policy direction to staff is made in the context of and with reference to council-adopted policy. This graphic illustrates why. It also illustrates the point that strategic planning is about promoting consistency and predictability in our decision-making, and to ensure that staff implementation is in alignment with it, and also how short-term decisions are made with the necessary reference to long-term context. As you can see, the several planning elements cover different time horizons. They all tie into and feed off of one another. The most obvious short-term decision we make each year, that's why it's shown at the top, is the adoption of the annual budget. And though it allocates our resources only 1 year at a time, we look far beyond just the next 12 months to anticipate and prepare for our future needs and to identify any foreseeable constraints on our ability to continue providing for those needs. Our 5-year fiscal forecast, which staff maintains in accordance with council-approved assumptions and parameters, helps us see the long-term implications of short-term budgetary decisions and to track our financial condition over time. The capital improvement plan is a running list of often big-ticket items that we may need to save up for, or at least come up with a plan for funding in the future. Those elements that I've just discussed, they're also informed by our council priorities. Those are adopted annually, but generally looking out over the next 5 years, and also are informed by the longer-term vision laid out in the comprehensive plan. So you can see on this slide how it all fits together. That's why we take the time each year by setting aside a full day or more, as we did last year. We had 2 days for our pre-budget planning retreat. Even though that's what we call it, it's about so much more than the budget, because only with reference to all of these planning elements can we, the council, give the city manager the policy direction he needs to then go and develop a proposed budget that's responsive to council's expectations. And of course, whatever he may come up with is always going to be subject to the final decision of council. Through the annual budget adoption process, the broader community discussion and public input on the basic question I pose each time, what is it that we want and what are we willing to pay for? That discussion also benefits from a shared appreciation, I emphasize, of the broader context. As important as the strategic planning model and its several elements are to Council's decision-making process, so too do the staff rely on it daily. They look in particular to the Council priorities for guidance in ensuring that their activities, both external and internal, are consistent with the policy direction they've been given. Now, I'll pull out from the strategic planning model the comprehensive plan element. As has been mentioned, it comes up this year for its 5-year review. The plan itself contemplates that it be reviewed periodically. It's a recognized best practice to ensure that the plan remains current and continues to meet the needs and desires of the community in expressing our overall long-term vision for the future. But the plan does not, however, specify exactly what that periodic review should look like. It could be as cursory or as in-depth as we want it to be. The direction given to staff at last year's pre-budget planning session was that the review should be more about positive civic engagement and community discussion of the comprehensive plan rather than about going into the process with the expectation of a wholesale rewrite. The general sentiment being that the plan is working and that the future vision it lays out remains valid, and all of that would be explored through the public review process. But the one change Council did identify was to add a chapter on flood mitigation to roll up and incorporate into the comprehensive plan the report and recommendations of our Citizen Flood Hazard Mitigation Task Force. Given the obvious importance of flood mitigation to Bel Air, it belongs in our longest term policy document. The other direction staff requested of Council was the level of resources to be devoted to the review process. Whether to staff it solely in-house, use an outside consultant, or some combination of the two. Council's direction was to conduct the review without any outside consultants, but with the understanding that that would result in the review process taking longer by not having outside assistance. Now, working off of that prior Council direction, staff developed and presented to the new Council a couple of weeks ago a detailed proposed work plan and schedule for review, with a number of engagement sessions for residents, community partners, and other stakeholders, all led by a steering committee comprising members of the Council and of the Planning and Zoning Commission and citizen appointees as well. It's no doubt a very ambitious plan, and it would take quite a lot of time and ongoing staff effort, again, because there would be no outside consultant on the project. In reacting to all of this, the new Council was clearly hesitant to commit such a big undertaking and gave feedback strongly suggestive of a less intensive, less time and resource-consuming scope and process. Where we left off, we'd allow some more time for Council members to read through and digest the plan and to give all of this some more thought before deciding how in-depth our review should be. And we anticipate following up with another workshop once everyone is ready. But whatever form the comprehensive plan review process may take, it remains an important community engagement opportunity in which we hope every resident and stakeholder will take part. Among the weighty, big picture questions the comprehensive plan seeks to address are the relationship between commercial redevelopment and our decidedly and deliberately residential community character, future land use, recognizing that given its long-term planning horizon, the plan does not presuppose the physical landscape will always be as it is today, and the quality, condition, and long-term outlook of our public infrastructure and services. So in sum, the comprehensive plan is a critically important element of our local government process and is integrally linked with every other element and touches on everything we do. More near term, the City Council priorities identify the key focus areas and strategies, and it serves as a reference and strategic planning tool for the city staff over the next 5 years. And of course, the priorities are an express statement of Council policy. Though they cover a mid-range time horizon, the priorities are reviewed annually and amended as Council sees fit. Plans can change. We may have more or fewer resources available in a given year, or the community and Council may seek a change in direction. Lest the document becomes stale, in last year's pre-budget planning session, Council took a different approach. Rather than starting with the existing priorities and simply updating them as we had in past years, instead we started from scratch. And we worked through a consensus building exercise that produced the 8 priorities now shown on the screen. I'll note that while cities typically utilize outside consultants for these planning sessions, to save money, we conducted ours in-house with staff as our facilitators, again, without driving outcomes. As you might expect, the substance of what we ended up with wasn't necessarily all that different from what we'd had before. Consider the underlying objectives of providing high-quality, premier city services and amenities, efficiently and as good stewards of public resources. None of that had changed. But the exercise reinvigorated the document and better informs staff's reliance on it. This year, the new council will again have the opportunity to adopt priorities, whether by updating these or starting over entirely. The remainder of my presentation will be organized according to these priorities. We'll take a closer look at each one, and then I'll overview where we've been, where we are, and according to the plans, at least as they exist now, where we see ourselves going. Just as staff take their direction from these priorities, they also offer a useful framework for assessing the current state of the city. So starting with local and regional flood mitigation, although the priorities are not presented in rank order, it's not an accident that this one is listed first. This policy statement distinguishes, as you can see on the screen, between local drainage improvements and regional flood control, and it reaffirms our efforts in seeking external funding from all available sources, whether in partnership with other entities on mutually beneficial projects or through grant applications. You'll recall our 3-pronged policy approach to flooding: local, regional, and regulatory. On the local front, Group C, Phase 2, consisting of Bolivar, the 4,500 block of Maple, 51 and 5,200 blocks of Spruce and North 5th, those will all soon be completed. And Group C, Phase 3, the 4,600 block of Cedar, 4,300 block of Cynthia, Larch Lane, Chelsea, and the 4,500 block of Mimosa, those will soon get underway. We're upsizing the storm sewers at strategic locations, including several of the aforementioned streets, from the typical 2-year design standard to a 100-year design standard to provide added underground storage capacity in addition to stormwater conveyance. These improvements are all within the Bonds for Better Bel Air 2016 bond program, but as announced this past year, we've been awarded 2015 and 2017 Community Development Block Grant disaster recovery grants totaling $4.35 million, and those grants reduce the amount of debt that we'll need to be able to complete these projects. On the regional front, our long-awaited master drainage concept plan is now underway in partnership with Harris County Flood Control and TxDOT, and the project website is now live. You see where I have the arrow on the screen. We encourage you to visit and check out BelAirMDCP, masterdrainageconceptplan.com. I encourage you to check it out, learn more about the project, and be sure to check back frequently for updates and public input opportunities as the project progresses. Also, as recommended by our Citizen Flood Hazard Mitigation Task Force, down in the regulatory part of the slide, the task force and the Building and Standards Commission both asked us to take a look at our flood repair permit process, and we went and updated those processes based on our experience following Harvey, and then we formalized those regulations and have added them to our code of ordinances. Turning to premier public works services, beyond drainage improvements in the city, we rely on public works for other critical infrastructure needs as well, and just our everyday municipal services that we depend on. With a number of civil projects going on all over town at any given time, project management and process improvement are areas of focus, although candidly, these are balanced against the budgetary constraints we imposed this year to keep the tax rate down. We're making great progress on our critical water line replacements. The Phase 1 blocks are all completed. We're 70% done with Phase 2, and significantly, cost savings from the first 2 phases have allowed us to expand by nearly 60% the scope of Phase 3, which is on schedule to begin construction this spring. When all is said and done, we'll have replaced 69,000 feet, more than 13 miles of aging, problematic, and failing water lines, and that's 23% more than we had originally planned to do in this bond program. Our wastewater treatment plant work is also completed. We'll soon be entering the final phase of that project, in which the performance, efficiency, and consumption reduction guarantees will be measured and monitored. As was mentioned during the Environmental Sustainability Board report, green waste management is a topic of interest for them. They've been working with the Public Works Department in investigating and evaluating potential green waste collection scenarios. Spoiler alert, sorry, IO. Unfortunately, thus far, we've been unable to identify any feasible low-cost scenarios, but he emphasized in the report that the board will continue looking into that and working with Public Works to see what they might come up with to address that initiative. Our premier public safety services have, of course, long been a hallmark in Bel Air. Our policy commitment to competitive public safety compensation and premier employment and training opportunities has helped us continue keeping positions filled in our police and fire departments. We have a long history of public safety outreach programs, including drug take-back events, car seat safety checks, rape aggression defense classes, touch a truck, shop with a cop, the Special Olympics fire truck pool, our work with Stuff the Sleigh, hurricane preparedness, National Night Out, the list goes on. And this year, our public safety departments have further added to that impressive list by increasing the frequency of our Stop the Bleed classes, working with BeLife and other seniors groups on the Remember When program, which addresses fall prevention, other home safety practices, partnering with Texas Children's Hospital on a summer drowning awareness course to help keep kids safe around the pool, and just ongoing outreach through the course of the year with kids of all ages in our local schools. Next, we're proud to have been recognized this year by the National Weather Service as a storm-ready community that recognizes the strength and effectiveness of our severe weather response plans, communications, and emergency operations. And that's not just about bragging rights, by the way. This distinction is credited toward our community rating system classification, so that lowers flood insurance premiums for Bel Air residents and property owners. We're grateful to the Bel Air Police and Fire Foundation once again this year and to all of its supporters. This year's grants, totaling nearly $125,000, have strengthened our public safety departments by providing an additional unmanned aerial vehicle with enhancements, a high water police vehicle, a new radar trailer, body cameras with data storage subscription, and dry suits for flood rescues. Another grant, you'll see the bottom of the slide, there's 3 grants in a row. Another grant recently awarded to our police department is for a full-time crime victim specialist. Our police department has long identified this as an area for potential improvement, and so when the opportunity arose, they jumped at it and they were able to secure federal funding through a very competitive process. We are just one of 36 communities nationwide selected to participate in the program. We'll receive more than $200,000 to fully fund the crime victim specialist position for 3 years. Not only will this improve crime victim services in the city, but will also free up police time and resources for other pressing needs. Yet another grant we've received will improve mobility in and through the city. This is a regional transportation grant of approximately $70,000. These are federal funds awarded at the local level by the Houston-Galveston Area Council and will provide systems upgrades for all 14 of the signalized intersections within the city. We're currently working on accelerating the timetable for that funding as much as possible. Now, all of these premier services we enjoy and depend on obviously come at a cost. And like any service business, our expenses are dominated by salaries and benefits, of which more than half are for public safety alone. Rising health insurance rates are a primary driver of forecasted growth in expenditures and put a strain on our ability just to maintain existing services, let alone to fund new enhancements. Our employees are constantly being asked to do more with less, as we have focused on not increasing our headcount as a way to manage these costs. As a predominantly residential community, heavily dependent on property taxes as our primary source of revenue, we strive to find the right balance between the level and quality of services we expect and the taxes we're willing to pay for them. Also in the balance each year is the need to maintain an appropriate reserve to ensure our ability to continue meeting our residents' service expectations in the year to come and to protect our coveted AAA bond rating. It wasn't easy this year, it never is, but the budget we adopted achieves that balance by limiting the tax rate increase without cutting any city services, and while also shoring up our ending fund balances to maintain a healthy reserve. We cut $150,000 from the budget for general fund salaries and benefits as we seek to contain growth over time in our biggest expense category. But there is a trade-off, as staff vacancies will be held open longer to make up the differences. And so while we haven't canceled any services, they could be impacted as a result of those open positions. Even with an effective increase of 1.64%, our tax rate is very competitive among our peers, as we'll show in just a moment. And isolating just the maintenance and operations portion of that increase, we got it down well below the new legislative rollback rate as though it had gone into effect a year early. So here's our popular buckets slide depicting the sources and uses in this year's budget, as we have shown in recent past budgets. The story is pretty much the same from one year to the next. The numbers will change a bit, but what you can see, particularly as you focus on the larger buckets, we see the same major themes, including our heavy reliance on property taxes, given our limited revenues from other sources. And then over on the expense side, see what it takes to provide city services, and specifically that's people. One other thing I'll point out on this slide, the two buckets on the revenue side, kind of towards the middle of the screen, that are labeled enterprise fund transfer, those are not your tax dollars, but rather utility billings that are transferred into the general and debt service funds from the enterprise fund to capture the general overhead and debt service associated with providing water, wastewater, and solid waste utility services. Now here we see property taxes make up 65% of all of our general fund expenditure, general fund revenues, excuse me. That puts us right at the top among our comparator communities. Now, as a quick side note, since this is the first slide that presents Bel Air in comparison to these other cities, I'll refer you back to the State of the City report handout you received tonight. There's a discussion in here on page 13 of how these comparator cities were selected and how we maintain this list from one year to the next. So I invite you to take a look at that. Now, a big part of why we're so dependent on property taxes is how little of our revenues come from sales taxes at 11%. And when you think about it, most of the other cities on this list are also pretty residential in character, and yet even among this group, we're still more property tax dependent than they are. Bear in mind further that of the 65% of our general fund revenues that come from property taxes, a whopping 86% of that is collected from residential taxpayers. As the cost of providing services continues to rise, and or when we as residents look to the city to provide more services, it's pretty clear what it takes to pay for them. When we talk about commercial redevelopment as one of the major goals of our comprehensive plan, this is one of the reasons why. An undervalued commercial sector necessarily means that residential taxpayers are bearing a greater portion of the burden of funding city services. That's not to suggest that the comprehensive plan calls for in any way abandoning our residential character, but it does focus on our already existing commercial areas as ripe for value-enhancing redevelopment opportunities. Let's not lose sight of what our property taxes go to pay for. Nearly half of our general fund budget goes to police and fire. Looking at your annual tax bill, the property taxes we pay go to a number of different taxing entities. The school district takes nearly half. Bel Air's portion is just under 20%. Of course, individual situations will vary depending on your exemptions and on your appraised value. Shown here is the breakdown for a home of the average taxable value in 2019, assuming the homestead exemption but no others, such as the over 65 exemption. As you can see, among our comparator communities, we measure up quite favorably. This slide takes that same average value house in Bel Air and shows what the tax burden would be in each of these other cities. Now, one thing to consider, and I have found that this often comes up in conversation when people make this comparison, as you look at some of these other cities, we've held the appraised value constant across the entire slide, but in some cases, keep in mind, you get a lot less house for that same money, and in some cases, you get more house for that same money. But still, this slide puts our city tax burden in perspective. Given the quality and responsiveness of city services we enjoy here in Bel Air, we're getting a pretty good value for our tax dollar. This slide just shows how our nominal rate stacks up statewide. Over the years, we've had a history of kicking the can on our infrastructure needs, and as that has been steadily catching up with us, plus the increasing urgency of our flooding problem, we have taken on more debt. That's why it's so important in the development of our budgets that we carefully protect our AAA bond rating. We also carefully manage our debt, including by regularly monitoring the market for refunding opportunities, and we've had some great success this year on that front. As you can see, recent bond refundings, we've been able to achieve $2.5 million in interest savings for the city. Most significant of all, with the CDBG disaster recovery grants I mentioned earlier in discussing our efforts on flood mitigation, plus cost savings in the earlier phases of our 2016 bond program and unused sidewalk money, we are able to push back by at least 2 years our forecast for future debt issuances. Remember that the 2016 bond program was originally intended to run for 3 years to be followed by a successive bond election in 2019. Our being able to push that back to at least 2021, if not beyond, as you can see here on the slide, results in a dramatic reduction to our projected debt service, tax rate, and total indebtedness. But yes, we do indeed carry a lot of debt. And again, that's driven by our ongoing and long-term infrastructure needs. While we're on this slide, remember I earlier pointed out the bucket representing the annual transfer from the enterprise fund into the debt service fund. The 14% and the 9% shown on this slide for water and wastewater, that's what I was talking about. We pay for that part of our debt on our monthly utility bills, not with our property taxes. We're proud to have once again been recognized by the Government Finance Officers Association for the quality and transparency of our financial reporting, with both the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting and the Distinguished Budget Presentation Award. As you can see, that puts us top 4% of cities nationwide, and we've been very proud of our finance department based on their recent efforts to add our name to that list. So continuing to quality of life, this is one of the longer policy statements in our council priorities document. I think that's because it reflects a lot of what we do right, the things that Bel Air is known for throughout the Houston area. And it's also an expression of our desire to continue building on these strengths. Our community partnerships enhance the quality of life in the city and help us retain our small town feel. We're known for our signature community building events throughout the year, such as July 4th, Holiday in the Park. The past couple of years have seen the addition of the local music fest at Evelyn's Park. This year we added the Bel Air Business Association's Foodie Fest, and thanks to our Bel Air Culture and Arts Board, as Andy reported to us, we've revamped and brought back the ever-popular Bel Air Arts and Crafts Festival. Also popular has been the Bel Air Citizens Academy, now through its 4th year. Even after doubling the class size, we're still on a wait list, and that's a good thing. Part of our broader effort for better community engagement, the Academy enhances the citizen experience by promoting access to and a better understanding of the inner workings of the city. Interested residents are encouraged to sign up with the city manager's office, and they'll get you in just as soon as they can. I understand in May they'll begin accepting applications. I'll also highlight our library's contribution to the quality of life in Bel Air. I'm proud to report that we have again been recognized for now the 3rd year in a row with the prestigious Achievement of Excellence in Libraries Award, placing ours in the top 10% of all public libraries statewide. As I've mentioned, our priority on commercial redevelopment expressly recognizes that it must be consistent with and supportive of our residential character. Now, among our commercial redevelopment highlights of late, the image in the background is of Bel Air Town Center, newly rebuilt and just about totally finished. I've heard from many of you your excitement as some of the new tenants have already moved in and opened for business. It felt like I actually saw half the city there the other night. We went for dinner before coming here to the daddy-daughter dance. If you've been by Bel Air at Ferris lately, you've seen the recent progress on the new Take 5 building to be constructed on that site. Also the medical building at Bissonnette and Newcastle. That's what's shown in the background on the preceding slide. And it has been recently announced also the popular bagel shop nearby on Hillcroft will expand into Bel Air later this year with the redevelopment of the pawn shop building at the corner of Chimney Rock. We welcome and are glad to see this level of continued investment along our commercial corridors. The Spruce and Fifth Drainage and Downtown Streetscape project will be wrapped up soon. And the Planning and Zoning Commission is making some progress with the rezoning of the former Chevron property, now known as Bel Air Place. And as council discussed a week ago, at P&Z's request, we're looking at getting a bit of professional technical assistance in the drafting of new zoning regulations for that site for a new zoning district to be called the North Bel Air Special Development District. All of that will ultimately come to council for approval before any new development can take place there. So as you can see, there's lots of current and future commercial redevelopment activity in the works. We're very excited to see that. Parks and facilities, as was noted earlier this evening, given the constraints on our recent budgets, and frankly that will continue for the foreseeable future, there's not much public funding available for parks and facilities improvements. So for that reason, we're all the more grateful to patrons for Bel Air Parks and to all of its supporters for raising the funds and donating to the city some great new park and playground features, including all new equipment at Ware Family Park, zip line at Evergreen Park, self-powered music balls in Lafayette, Lofton, and Mulberry Parks, and a connection swing for young children and their parents to enjoy together in Lofton Park. So if you haven't seen those new amenities, be sure to go check them out. Officer Lucy Dog Park will also get some love with the addition of a canine agility course later this year. Significantly, as was noted earlier, Patrons has been working with the city on an Amenities for All Abilities initiative, and that's to make our parks more inclusive for children of all ages with different physical, social, cognitive, and sensory abilities. Also 100% privately funded, Phase 2 improvements will soon be underway at Evelyn's Park. That will include features from the updated master plan that address functionality concerns responsive to community feedback and input since the park first opened. Things like permanent shade structures, upgraded play areas, and a splash pad water feature that will also function as a performance stage when the water's turned off. Based on observed pedestrian patterns throughout the park, some of the walking paths and cut-throughs are being modified as well. Next on the list this year, we celebrated at long last the completion of the Municipal Facilities Project, consisting of this building, City Hall and Civic Center, and also the Police and Municipal Court building next door. Note the other facilities and parks on our long-term to-do list, identified in the Capital Improvement Plan. Public Works, Library, and Evergreen Park. We recognize the need for those, but no funding has yet been allocated. The last priority on our list reflects our continued policy commitment to being a premier employer. Earlier, I made reference to the significant public safety compensation enhancements we had been evaluating and first implemented for the fiscal year 2017, specifically to improve recruitment and retention in our police and fire departments, including maintaining base salaries at the 75th percentile of market. Our focus on that priority has indeed helped us keep those positions filled ever since. Across the entire city workforce, we continue to monitor our competitiveness relative to market, but weighed, of course, against our budgetary constraints. So you recall, for that reason, the city manager recommended no step increases in this year's budget, but that's something that we're going to have to continue looking at in the coming years to avoid falling behind. We're also providing more and better employee wellness programs, not only to provide those benefits to our employees, but also to help in keeping our health insurance costs down as much as possible. As always, it's my pleasure to present this State of the City to you. I thank you for your interest. Staying informed does not stop here. We work hard all throughout the year to provide good and objectively verifiable information and to make it easily accessible to you. We love hearing from you anytime you have questions and hope you'll visit the city website often. Here on the screen are some of the resources you'll find that are regularly updated online. Notify Me offers more than 24 individual topics for which you can subscribe to receive periodic email or text message notices. We also strongly encourage you to sign up for Prepare Bel Air, which is our emergency alert system and is used both citywide and in a more targeted way for localized alerts that you need to know about. So Notify Me and Prepare Bel Air are different and are used for different purposes, so we hope you're taking advantage of both of them. You know, sometimes we'll hear from people who complain to us that the city doesn't communicate, and then when we ask them if they're registered to receive our communications, they admit they're not. So I would say it starts right there, at least with Notify Me and Prepare Bel Air. Next on the list, The Boulevard. That's our monthly e-newsletter with updates and information on city services and events. That's available on the website, and you can have it delivered to your inbox through Notify Me. You can also find us on social media, as well as live streaming or tuning into meetings of the City Council and of our statutory boards. So those of you at home who have tuned in tonight, hello and thank you for joining us. Finally, at the bottom, a selfish plug for my Mayor's Musings blog. I hope you find that to be a helpful and timely source of information and engagement. I've heard from many of you throughout the year, and I appreciate your continued feedback on my blog. I hope you found this State of the City interesting and informative. I thank you all for being here and for being a part of what makes our community so special. I look forward to working together with each of you over the coming year toward our common goal of making Bel Air the best it can be. Thank you all very much. Naturally, it was the night of the State of the City that happened to fall for my inspirational reading, so you've heard from me excessively this evening. But now that we've arrived at community interest items from the Mayor and Council, I'll invite my colleagues to share their comments, and don't forget to hit the microphone button. If you're currently red, you should make it green. But Councilmember Wesley, if you'll start us off with community interest items, and we'll pass it on down.
Pass.
Got one pass. Councilmember Fife.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you, Mayor, for the inspirational reading. I had not had an opportunity to read that teacher's article, and very moving. Second, I'd like to thank all of the members of our boards and commissions who work tirelessly volunteering for their city, for our city. And I hope when any of you all see them, you will tell them thank you. And I've had a terrific time working with Andy and the Culture and Arts Board. It's a lively group, shall we say. And we work hard and have fun, sometimes in that order, sometimes in the other. So, and thank you all for coming.
Councilmember Hotze.
Thank you, Your Honor. I appreciate it. Just real quickly, I want to thank the citizens who volunteer and work on our boards. As we saw tonight, there's a lot of work that goes into that. In particular, I want to mention and thank Sharon for the Parks report. It's always so difficult to deliver that after BeLife comes up here and tells you about the 4,000 people that have come to their events. I remember being in that position years ago, and really appreciate everything you do, and everyone else on all the boards as well. Last thing I want to do, I want to thank you, Mayor, for your State of the City address. You know, you had noted how we on council, this is not a full-time job for us, right? We're sort of the board of directors, but you put a lot of work into this, you put a lot of effort into it, and you put a lot of information in a real digestible manner, both in your presentation, and I want to commend you on this concept, which I didn't even know we were getting tonight, the State of the City report. You know, the first time doing that, I think that makes it really easy for everyone at any time to come through and look at this information and find ways in which they can take what I think is really sizable, voluminous information in real digestible bites. And so I want to commend you for the work you did tonight. Thank you.
The button, Councilmember.
Yeah, I can't beat what the mayor has to say. The only thing I would add would be that, in this last fall in the election season, we did a lot of walking and talking to people, and as I ride my bike through the area, just because I have knee replacements, I need that knee exercise, but I stop and talk to people, and you can't beat what you learn from other people. And today I actually had to stop and I talked for an hour. I got very little bike ride. I got mostly input from a resident of Bel Air. And so keep talking to us. Keep calling us up. Keep sending us emails. We're listening. Thank you.
Pappas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too, I don't think it's, say it enough. On all of the volunteers on the boards and commissions, particularly the chairs, and their officers. I just think if you sit there and listen to the volume of things that are going on in this town that are instigated by our boards and commissions, it's phenomenal, and it really does create the pattern and the quilt that is Bel Air. And I think it's certainly evident in the passion and the remarks and the quality of the effort that's expended by our residents. And I think it's also one of the things that we talked about before is that each and every year we continue to get additional and greater quantities of qualified people who are looking to become involved. And I think that is certainly borne out in the quality of the events, the time and the commitment. And all of that time and commitment is given at no cost, and certainly at the expense of families and other things that people could be doing for themselves, but yet they're here giving it to the city. So for all of you who are involved in these boards and commissions, for all of the residents who participate, for all the residents who come forth, in addition to all the tax money that they give, but all of their time, toil, and talent they give to all of the various events, particularly those that enhance our parks through all the various stakeholders that assist in the city. So it takes everybody. It takes all of us to not only just pay taxes, but our time and our effort, and also our treasure that we give in so many other ways. And I think that you see it in full bloom tonight, and so it's a wonderful opportunity for us to do that. I also want to take a moment to say that I also appreciate this report. This is a very useful tool that if you see it in person, I think you can look through it. Take the time to look through it because I think it's very helpful. It's a primer of sorts of a lot of this going on in the city, and I think it's helpful because there's so much information. Sometimes it's hard to bring it all together. Mr. Mayor, you did an excellent job. I think that I've been on council for 6 years, and you still pick up a lot of things that didn't quite hit home. And each time that I hear the State of the City address, and each time I delve into matters of the city, it helps constantly reaffirm of how much is going on in this city. The quality of not only the staff, but its residents, its volunteers, and the commitment that everybody has as a collective body. And I think the one thing that you said that was very important was everybody has their place, staff has their place, council has their place, and so do our residents who are part of it all. And I think everybody working together brings us to the point where we can achieve all these wonderful goals, get all of those wonderful awards, and bring in all of that grant money because other people see quality and see and appreciate why it's a wonderful thing to invest in this town. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone, for the opportunity to once again present the state of the city. It's always a special evening on our city calendar. Thanks, everyone, for being here. I want to echo the sentiments of appreciation to all of our board and commission volunteers. The fabric of the community, as you say. I'll join with Mayor Pro Tem Pappas and Councilmember Verma in expressing appreciation for this report. Thanks, Neil, for your kind comments, but I can't really take the credit. This is a staff-initiated effort to make the state of the city that much more useful each year. And so this is just the very first iteration. I have confidence that in coming years we'll continue to build on and improve on the document. But the intent is definitely there to make this information accessible to all of our residents in a informative in a digestible manner. In past years, not that I didn't bore you enough tonight, but in past years, we had slides with a lot of this extra detail that now is presented in a supplement format to take with you. So I hope you'll refer to it. She must have known I was going to call her out. I'm looking for Victoria Aravallo and the rest of her team, just to give them kudos on another hugely successful daddy-daughter dance this past weekend. Really great job done by them. Not just my own observation, but I had a lot of other dads come up to me with compliments. So I want to give kudos to the team. And also, of course, this is the first year that we've been able to host it here in this room. It was just perfect for the event. So kudos to our staff on that one. Finally, just a quick reminder of what should be a very short special session next Monday night. That's the 10th. Have a special session just to adopt the ordinance that formally calls the May charter election. So don't forget to be here for that. Is that at 6 p.m.? 6 o'clock next Monday night. That's all I've got, and it's perfect, right on time. At 9 o'clock, we are adjourned.